thought we'd give you a little overview before we start today. So prior to introducing the small forest of forms you have in front of you and the online data management system you'll use to review proposals, we'd like to give you an update on the Links to Success initiative, our perspective regarding the next steps in the Links evolution, and clarification regarding various roles in the initiative. Then we'll introduce you to the context of the letter of intent, the process related to links, and how to evaluate each LOI for success, including use of a logic model. Then we'll look at how to access and navigate the ODM. So you have before you some color-coded forms that we'll be referencing through the day. The letter of intent for integrated service providers, these are the folks who coordinate all of the services and link sites, is green, and we'll be referencing that throughout the training. The second letter of intent form is for linking partners. Most of the fields in it are the same as for the ISP, so we will use the ISP form in the training, and then we will just tell you where there are areas that are slightly different for collaborative partners. You will then see a rating form. These are the forms that you will fill out in the review process. The applications come to us by 5 p.m. on November 10th. I will need a day or two to scroll through them and make sure they are all eligible and complete before releasing them to you. You will get an email from me saying that they are ready for your review. I would anticipate late in the day on the 12th. So then you will have until our review meeting, which has been confirmed for November 21st, to prepare looking at those. We are asking that you send us your reviews by the 20th so that we can put them all together and have them ready for discussion at the meeting. Okay. Also, the review sheets are slightly different for ISP agencies and linking partners. That's why you have two in your packet. You then have an ODM dashboard. I'm delighted to tell you that Patty Massis, Queen of the ODM, will be doing that part of the training. You have some tips on the review process itself. You have funded partner standards and policies. All applicants must comply with general funding directives and funding directives specific to links. Thanks to my colleague Ann Bergen, you have a wonderful reference sheet, which is yellow, which tells you where to find things in these bigger documents as we get to them in the training today. And then you have reference materials that you probably will not need today, but we wanted to make sure you had for while you're doing the reviews. A call for investment guide. When we go through the roadmap today, that is a form that you will find in this. You have your own set of the slides that we will be showing you today to make notes on, and you have the full agenda for community impact. Okay, the ones that are in the manila envelope are the ones that you are less likely to actually need today. You want to keep them that way.
Those are the same across all three.
How you access and navigate the ODM is the same regardless of which LOI team you're on. However,
all these are all the same too.
The support documents are, yes, but the roadmaps, of course, are different by impact area and target issue. Okay. So we are ready to move on to the evolution of Links to Success. In our current funding cycle, which did begin in 2009 and will end on June 30th of this year, we have had a focus on implementation fidelity. As you know, the initiative began in 2006, and as is common for any new initiative, there have been changes of people and providers and places. And so as we've weathered that, we've had to look at coming up with ways that we could introduce people to the initiative fully ready to implement our strategies. So we have just recently had approved the first set of policies and procedures for the Links initiative. We implemented last year a series of quarterly lunch and learns for site coordinators regardless of ISP agency so that they could cross-pollinate each other in terms of their specialty services. Some ISPs specialize in case management, some in academics, and we are inviting child welfare agencies to the ISP role too. And so we want them to be able to inform each other's practice, but also we want to be able to introduce things that relate to policy or strategies in a united setting, and then look at things that we know have been more difficult to accomplish. For example, our next Lunch and Learn is having a guest speaker about parent outreach, because we know that our community learning center model will be most effective when parents are also invested in the school as a community center. So that is something that we've been working on. We've implemented enhanced data tracking, standardized first what we collect, how we collect it, how they send it at their mid-year and year-end reporting. And as we move into the new funding cycle, we've also chosen performance measures that they will be using so that we can compare apples to apples. And then we had meetings with the superintendents, and we have always had at least annual meetings with the principals, most often 3 times a year, to check how the Links to Success services are working in their school. If there are service gaps, how we can help our site coordinators and ISP agencies respond to those, and how we can utilize the non-TUW funded services in the school to integrate with the TUW funded services in the school on behalf of the most at-risk children. We've identified a concern in this period of time about partner instability. There was a loss of an ISP mid-cycle. Unfortunately, the Boys and Girls Club of the Trident area closed its doors last June 30th. And so there has been a new ISP. They actually took one of our schools all of last year, South Carolina Maritime Foundation, and they jumped in to take the 2 schools that Boys and Girls Club could no longer administer, and so they are now at Goodwin and Cane High as well, this being their first year in those schools. We have seen that in these difficult economic times, not only did an ISP agency need to stop their participation in the initiative, but some of the smaller programs that were innovative and creative but didn't have strongly diversified funding fell out as well, among them Sidewalk Chalk and Earth Force. So it will be particularly important for all of us as we review the LOIs to look at funding stability, diversified funding, experience in collaborations, because when a funded partner falls out in this initiative, there isn't a way mid-cycle to replace them. And so something that we thought that was important in designing the constellation of services for the next 3 years just isn't readily replaced. And then we have a commitment as we move forward to deepening the initiative in each site. Research indicates that 2 or more continuous services is what makes a difference for children at risk. And so we want to make sure that every child who takes advantage of a LINK service has at least a second LINK service, and that those are strategically chosen by the administration of the school, the faculty of the school, the site coordinator, and the linking partner services to best meet the needs that are causing risk for dropout. So there will be some children who need 2 academic partners, and some children who need a mental health and an academic partner, and some children who need 2 basic needs supports, and some children whose parent needs a financial stability support and they need an academic support, and some children who will frankly need more than 2. However, we want to make sure that every child has at least 2 to ensure the most success, and to also inspire the kind of case collaboration and shared planning for children that has been demonstrated to be effective in overcoming risk. So in order to deepen the initiative, we want to make sure that there are child welfare, family support, academic and behavioral supports in all sites. We have traditionally had that in terms of having Dean Norton and other services for school liaison products. We have had family support, most notably with the introduction of the Financial Stability Project last year. And we have had tutoring and academic supports and after-school programs, as well as behavioral support one-on-one with the site coordinators participating in the behavioral program of the school, usually PBIS, but also in terms of having mental health supports in the schools. What we mean by deepening is that there are children for whom those things are simply not enough. For example, Dee Norton is a one-time training for staff that helps with identification and response and referral. But we know that in some of our schools, as many as a third of the children have had foster care placement related to abuse and neglect issues. So if there could be staff in the school, a service in the school for those children to do counseling to mitigate those risks and to help them transition back home or to an alternate provider more smoothly, we know that those children are disproportionately represented in the dropout rate. So we want to proactively look for those services. So one of the things you'll see as we move through this training is that we've designed a roadmap that has 17 strategies. And what we're going to try for as we choose between the LLIs is to get as many of those strategies covered in each site as possible. So we may get, for example, 5 great proposals for parent education services. That's a new strategy, parent education. We may choose to move 1 or 2 forward so that we can also choose a mentoring program. So I'm going to have a system for you at the review meeting where you can see the number of providers who have proposed at each strategy. It is also possible that we will not have proposals or not be able to fund proposals for every strategy. For example, we have a commitment to increasing the percentage of schools that have after-school programs for extended day initiatives and summer programs for expanded year initiatives. They are incredibly cost intensive. So we have said right from the start to our potential partners that that may take the full 3 years of the funding cycle to develop funding for. So we may have the opportunity to fund some of them in select sites at this point, and we want to know what can be offered so that if we have significant increases in campaign or funding through other sources, we might be able to develop those mid-cycle. Okay?
I mean, if I could interject process-wise, because I believe that Steve is the only person during the last funding cycle who actually participated in what we're doing during this phase. This is the LOI, this is the first opportunity that programs have to tell us that they have an interest in proposing a particular service. So we're bringing you into the funding decision-making process earlier than we did last time. So, I'm sorry that I didn't kind of give you that kind of big picture thing to begin with. So that when last time, by the time that you came in to review the programs, all the ISPs had been chosen, the linking partners had been chosen, there had been a small group who had done what you're now doing this time. So you're in at the very beginning. So when Eileen is saying we may have several different proposals for the same service, we don't know that until they come in, but you will be making the decisions about which linking partners will be offered during the funding process, and then come January into February, process will continue the same that it did the last time that you were involved. Does that make sense?
Thank you, Bonnie. This is also my first funding cycle, so I welcome Bonnie's interjections anytime. If you can go back for just a second. The last part of our commitment is to place a priority on collaborations. The integrated service model for community-centered learning center development in LINCS is collaborative by nature. However, we are excited to hear among our potential proposers that they are also working together to look at a way to leverage funds to be able to do more services. And so you may very well be seeing proposals submitted by more than one agency in partnership. And we hope that that will be productive for us. Next. So we will be using the integrated strategies roadmap. It looks like this. It is in your call for investments. We will go through it a little bit later in the training. But this is the design form that our currently funded partners helped us to come up with to look at the next evolution for LINCS. We know that it takes a number of years to develop fully a community learning center. And from 2006 forward, we've been doing that piece by piece with exciting elements added in just the last year. As I mentioned before, the Financial Stability Project, and Blair is very familiar with that work. However, as we went through and standardized performance measures, there were changes to some of the current services too, in terms of looking at how we'll know whether or not children are succeeding. For example, we always measured increases in MAP scores, and we will still do that. That's measures of academic performance. Now we're asking to tell us whether or not the child is reading on grade level before we look at MAPS improvement, because of course for those children who are not, we want to do something more intensive to get them up to grade level and then still help them improve on their MAPS scores. We've added both financial stability strategies and health strategies, and that is why we are so thrilled to have Blair and Lou here representing their impact councils, because in the integrated model, financial stability services are there for adults to access in order to reduce school transients for kids, so kids can stay in their home school and succeed there. And health strategies, of course, reduce out-of-seat time due to absence and help children succeed in school. So we're looking at all of that together. Thanks so much.
Well, Eileen is turning the page. A little bit more of an update on some of the, Eileen has given us kind of an overview of some of the changes in funded partners, but you all may remember that when we went to visit, we also had Louie's Kids. Remember that particular program? As it turns out, Lewis, who is executive director of the program, before we even started the last funding cycle, withdrew his program. So we ended up not having a health service. So we're hoping, we don't know at this point how many applicants we may get for that, but regardless of how many actually come through this cycle, what we're saying is bringing in the health component is really important to Links to Success. So the Health Impact Council will actually be helping to develop some initiatives over time to be able to augment that. And then Eileen has mentioned the Financial Stability Project a couple of times. So since we all approved, or you all approved who was going to move forward last time, we have also brought in adult education classes, which are GED classes, English as a second language classes in particular sites, as well as financial literacy classes, education classes where people are coming in, basic needs, where if somebody is having trouble paying their light bill or they're about to be evicted, they actually have some organizations that are helping to provide the services necessary to help them with those transitions so they don't prevent that from happening. So the kind of the shell of what you approved last time has grown in between the cycle, but it's also contracted in some of the original programs that you had approved 3 years ago.
Thank you. So now we'll get to the contextual review, and that is that the LOI, the letter of intent, is designed from the resource document, so all of those things in your manila packet. This includes the agenda for community impact, which each of our impact councils and a host of other community volunteers contributed to set forward our 10-year goals. In education, that goal is that 88% of children entering 8th grade will graduate on time 5 years later, prepared for higher education and or employment. Currently, about 70.5% of children are graduating on time, and at some of our schools, as few as 43%. So that will be a significant leap forward in 10 years. And to do that, we know we have to be very strategic in where we put resources and how we enter collaborations. We will be looking as we review these applicants for alignment with the 10-year goal. So people may propose a service that you think would be lovely in a school environment. you have to ask yourself the question, how does it work with the other services in that link site to move forward toward high school graduation? Remembering that currently we're in elementary and middle schools, so we're focusing on developing the skills that will help children continue to learn, continue to be bonded to their school, continue to have a sense of self and a sense of their future that will lead them toward high school graduation. In that way, we also want to make sure that we're aligned with community indicators. As you go through, if you look at your yellow sheet, it'll tell you where to find each of those. Among our community indicators in education are reading at 3rd grade, on level in 3rd grade, high school graduation. So we want to make sure that while we're intervening in 11 specific schools, and of course we have other education initiatives going at the same time, that the work that we're doing and our partnerships with other people doing education work in our community are resulting in sustainable change toward our 10-year goal. You have the Call for Investment Guide, which sets forth general funding directives, and they include working with populations with the greatest need, making sure every applicant agency has diverse funding streams, and we are not using any legacy funding. So everybody proposes as a new applicant in this process. And we're looking at geographic investing. We are Trident United Way, and therefore we need to make sure that there is service available in each of our 3 counties, and ideally 4 school districts. We want to make sure that we're looking at target issue specific funding directives. When we showed you the roadmap, they are right up on top, and we will be going through those for links in just a little bit. The strategies from those roadmaps, the outcome statements that are listed as target strategies, and the performance measures we've asked them to use. In addition to choosing 2 or more of the strategies in our links roadmap, the agencies who are proposing will be telling us other things they measure for their specific service. So we will see that in the applications as well. We're looking at the funded partner standards and policies, which I will screen before you see them, which are requirements for funding. So you won't get any LOIs to review that don't meet those standards and policies. And then there are general eligibility requirements. Again, staff will screen those, that an applicant agency is either a 501c3 or is in a collaboration with a 501c3, and that they've been operational for a full year. The letter of intent determines who will be invited to apply for funding. There are 3 LOI forms. You get to look at 2 of them. So there is a general form for other than links proposals. But in links there is, as you have in front of you, the integrated service provider form and the linking partner form. LOIs are submitted for each program requesting funding. Therefore, it is possible that an organization will submit more than one. It's a 3-year funding cycle beginning on July 1st, 2012 and running through June 30th, 2015. And of course, it's always contingent on successful TUW fundraising and the program remaining in good standing. Do you have any questions about context or the overview so far? Well, great. Okay. So the process for the letter of intent is that it's due on November 10th at 5 p.m. and the system locks down at that point. So we're hoping not too many people are calling Patty at 4:59. Once that locks down, staff are able to begin to screen through them for those 2 things that you saw, the funded partner standards and policies, and things that will keep us from sending things to you that shouldn't be reviewed. Staff will pre-screen the LOIs for eligibility requirements, and then there are council recommendation meetings scheduled in each area. Yours is November 21st, 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. If there is any conflict of interest, we would ask you to let us know that with any particular agency that is applying, and we will handle that, of course, by not having you participate in the recommendation for that particular agency. And of course, all of the discussions need to be confidential. There's a whole discussion process, and it is very possible that we will receive more great applications than we can fund. So it is important to us that we be able to communicate results to agencies in a way that is affirming of their interest in participating in TUW initiatives. Chairs present the recommendations to the CIC on December 6th. The CIC presents recommendations to the board on December 15th. And then there will be board notification to the applicants. There will be a letter of invitation to apply or a letter of denial. Letters of denial will not specify the reason for denial, but long-term funded partners will be called. And the letters are distributed electronically late in December 2011, and all of our prospective proposers know that the funding decisions by the board are final. All of the prospective proposers have been invited to both meetings discussing the LOI and then group technical assistance sessions that they've been able to bring any question they have about the LOI process to. There's also a way for them to submit questions online, and therefore right up until November 7th for technical assistance, they have our support in making their best application. Okay? For a successful LOI, we need to first screen for program eligibility, and again, that will be taken care of for you. Then you are most looking for strong alignment to the Agenda for Community Impact, the 10-year goals, and the annual community indicators. Then you are looking to make sure that it targets one or more links to success strategies. That's a little confusing because we have asked our integrated service providers to address 2 or more, but linking partners only need to address 1 or more. Okay? That there are strong logic models in place. We will go over those in just a minute, but the narrative section and the logic model sections of the application need to describe each other. So one gives sort of a snapshot of how the thinking goes for what they will put in and what they will measure and what they expect. And then the narrative more fully puts flesh on the skeleton of the logic model and tells you exactly in detail how they will do it. And then we want to make sure that LOIs meet the call for investment guide requirements and directives, and the strongest programs advance to funding process. And again, in terms of strength, we're looking for a couple of things. We're looking for fiscal strength so that they're likely to weather any storms over the next 3 years. We're looking for collaborative strength, that they have a good model if they're a linking partner for how they'll communicate with and integrate with the integrated service provider in the school. And if they're an ISP, how they'll get that information, share that information, use that information from the linking partners. And then we're also looking if there are competing proposals in the same strategy area for the one that seems to have the most experience, the most depth, the most potential for return on investment. When you're evaluating the LOI, you want to use the rating form, which is accessed via the online data manager, the ODM, and Patty's going to take us through that. And again, there are 2 forms, one for ISP applicants and one for linking partner applicants. There are 2 rating forms, as you see. The volunteers rate each letter of intent, producing a total score. There's a maximum of 100 points. The scores are tallied, resulting in an average total score for each program. When you come to the review meeting on the 21st, we will have those scores available for you. The average total score starting point is the starting point for discussion in the recommendation meeting, but it's not the whole thing. There will be relative merits of each program and how it fits with the design for links in total that will be discussed. Volunteers reach consensus on which programs to advance in the funding process, and then you make recommendations to the CIC of 3 things: programs invited to apply, programs not invited to apply, and breakthrough opportunities. It's really important that we look at this process as a screening process and that we screen out applicants and move forward the strongest applicants. We do no one a favor to invite them back to application and have them go through the work of that process if we don't think they're very strong in the LOI process. And so this is critically important that we be prepared to say no to a portion of the LOIs we receive. And that the ones we say yes to are creating a constellation of services in each LINCS site that works toward the community indicators and the 10-year goal. Is everybody with me? Okay, next slide. These are the rating form criteria. As you see, once again, there are separate ones for integrated service providers and linking partners. And things are given a point value. As we go through the training, we'll talk a little bit about how to exercise your decisions about point assignment. But we are looking in the ISP agencies. These are the agencies that coordinate all of the services in the school, funded by TUW and not funded. So we're looking for experience leading collaboration. Obviously, they have to be able to be motivating and cross-pollinating the services in the school. Alignment with the 10-year goal, that they're serving our target population. Of course, in our general funding directives, we talk about geographic reach in underserved areas and people at or below 200% of poverty. But in LINCS, we also ask that the students that are targeted first are the students most at risk, and so we're looking for that. Geographic region served, we would like for providers to be able to go to all LINCS schools, the capacity to expand, because after we deepen the initiative, we hope to grow the initiative, so we need to know that organizations have the capacity to grow with us. In those two areas, there may be some organizations that have geographic limitations by their charter, and so that should not disqualify them, but they need to be able to tell us about that. The ISP's narrative, how they will coordinate all the services, and also what they bring to the initiative beyond service coordination, because we do expect that our ISP agencies will bring something, either a case management model, a child welfare model, services around academics, something that adds value to the initiative. And then we have requirements of them, and you will see this as you go through. So life skills instruction is one of those requirements. They have to tell us how they're going to do that. They have to be able to sit on the core team or leadership team of the school. So we're asking that the narrative would show us how they plan to do the things we require of the site coordinator position. Then there is a logic model that supports and undergirds the descriptive narrative, so that after you've read through the narrative, when you look at the logic model, you say, okay, I see how this leads to this. And that if there's anything in the logic model that you didn't see in the narrative, that's a concern. If there are things in the narrative that you don't see in the logic model, that's a concern. Then you're looking at the budget, particularly with an eye to diversity of funding, and again, fiscal viability as they move through. For linking partners, some of the same confounds: target population, geographic region served, capacity to expand, the narrative, the logic model, alignment to the 10-year goal. Again, this will be particularly important with linking partners because we want to make sure that the services proposed are not just great things for kids. They're great things for kids that will help them succeed behaviorally or academically or in terms of family stability, so that they stay in school and succeed in school. And again, budget and diversity of funding. Are there any questions about the rating parameters?
How much interest have you seen in organizations wanting to be ISPs?
I believe that we will have at least one new applicant for that role, and that our current ISP agencies will be reapplying. So, anything else? Okay, next. Helpful tips. It is helpful to read the entire letter of intent before completing the rating form. We hope that people, and we have instructed applicants to use the instructions in each section to include what should be in that section, but there are several places in the LOI where information deepens as you go through it. So if you read the whole thing first, you'll get a better snapshot of what they're applying for. The printed LOI may be helpful to reference while scoring, so we recommend that you print them out and that you bring them to the recommendation meeting along with your rating forms and comments. If you make comments as you go through evaluating them and bring them with you, it will jog your memory, because we anticipate as many as 40 proposals in this area. As I said to you in the email, we will not expect that any of you review more than 10. We hope that it will be closer to 6 or 7 that you're each reviewing, but we promise it won't be more than 10. The comment sections are for your reference. We will review all final scores, and the ranking should match your impressions. So when you've been through them all and then you've gone through and rated them all, you want to ask yourself from the top score to the bottom score, is that really how you would choose? And in each category. So if you happen to be reviewing ISP applications, you're ranking the ISPs. And if you are mostly reviewing linking partners, you're ranking them. And I would suggest that if you have several that are on the same strategy, parent education, after school program, academic tutoring or mentoring, that you rank them even within that, so that you come to the discussion ready to talk about the relative merits and weaknesses of each proposal. You want to save often and before exiting the form. The ODM can be a little quirky, so what we've told all our funded partners is start early, save often, and you know, we will say the same thing to you. And then you want to complete your ratings by the deadline date and time, which is Friday, November 18th at 12 noon. That gives Patty time to turn it around for us for the meeting on the 21st. The letter of intent general form. This is Patty's. Oh, this part is not. Okay, good. So, experience leading collaborations is the first thing. You're looking at...
That label is wrong. This is actually the ISP form. So we're going to go fully through the ISP form. What we've done, because there isn't anything in the ODM that's going to look like this slide. But what we've done is we've taken the portion of the LOI, which is on the bottom. That's where you're going to find this information. So the stuff that Hattie calls that teal. I'm not sure what color that is, but that bluish green color. And then the section on the top is what the rating form question looks like. So do you understand the slides? It's giving you a snapshot of that's the question you're going to answer and where you're going to find it in the LOI.
So this form, the rating form, is the top one that you will be filling in. And then the integrated service provider status and collaboratives is what you'll be looking at in the ODM. So the first confound that we're looking at is experience leading collaborations. So you want to make sure that they've demonstrated experience in leading collaboratives. For example, coordinating collaborative services, reporting collective impact outcomes, leading continuous quality improvement initiatives, etc. And that they have diverse established community partnerships, and that they've established formal relationships with partners using memorandums of agreement, funding agreement, shared data, and training. Okay. So if they had some of those but not all, it would change your point allocation. And you would enter in the comment field the things that affected your decision making about the points you assigned. Again, we hope that you will read the whole thing first and then come back and look at this. So when you're looking at it in the document they've submitted online, you're going to see that they've checked either the program has been fully operational for a year or not, and they must be. So you see if it's no, they can't apply for funding, and you should not even be seeing any no's because they should have been screened out, but we're just telling you that in case. And then their status as an integrated service provider. They're going to tell us if they have a 501c3. The integrated service providers must. The linking partners, if they're associated with an ISP agency, don't have to. But the ISP agencies must have a 501c3. So if they have filed for one rather than having one currently. They're going to give us the date for that and the sponsoring organization if it's not the program name we're used to that's on the application.
Just looking at me.
Yeah, I was puzzled
so-
by that
yeah.
comment, that they're not a 501c3 requirement. Why is that?
During the last funding cycle, you may remember, and I have to, there's some confusion in terms of time. Was the Department of Mental Health applying directly whenever you guys were reviewing? They were in the, whenever you went to visit the specific programs, the Department of Mental Health was there, is that correct? No. Okay, so you're all looking blank, so probably not. We have evolved a couple of partners over the last 3 years that they work with populations similar to the ones that we're interested in, like the Department of Mental Health, but they are not a 501c3. But we have developed a partnership with them. So in this particular collaborative application, the lead, which is the ISP, must have a 501c3. And most of the programs will have a 501c3, but we will have a few partners we anticipate that will reapply that, again, treat a very similar population to what we're trying to get services for. And we had not been able to find a nonprofit partner to provide that service. So we were contracting, and all of them fall into that government category. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So that will take us to the next slide, which is alignment with the 10-year goal. So again, you're looking at the description of how the program will contribute to the 10-year goal. This will be true on the linking partner application as well. So that's all about high school graduation. We're looking at how the narrative and the logic model go together, and we rate the degree to which you believe the program will help to achieve the 10-year goal. Does it make sense to you that children participating in this service and another will move closer to staying in school, succeeding in school, graduating high school? So we're going to ask that they describe exactly how they'll contribute to the 10-year goal. They have a word limit for this, but it should be very clear to them. They should have a mission that drives this, and they should have a model that drives this, and they should be able to describe that to us. So again, you would be looking at that entire field, the 3 confounds, and allocating your points based on their ability to address all 3. Okay, next slide. Target population. They will have reviewed the general funding directives. You will not be seeing it if they do not comply with those. However, we're asking that they describe, based on economic, social needs, demographics, etc., how they are serving the target population, and you'll be looking to make sure they have hit everything in that instruction line. So economically, the majority of the students are living at or below 200% of poverty, or the parents they're serving are, and because these are Title I schools in high poverty areas, that is almost always true. And for the demographic factor, you're looking at how they're addressing underserved families, but also those in need of a specialized intervention. So of course we would expect a referral process for mental health services or a referral process for GED services that made sense. The program demonstrates experience serving high poverty families in which children are at risk for school failure, and the program describes effective methods for reaching the target population. So you're looking first that they're doing what we're asking them to do, that they've had experience doing that, and that they have a model that seems effective. Hopefully they are also telling us that they have used this model before, but if they're not, that they have, it's research-based and they have reason to believe it will succeed. Okay. The next area is the geographic region served. Again, several of the agencies currently working with us and those we think will be proposing because they've attended meetings have geographic limitations. They are chartered in only 1 or 2 counties. That should not count against them. but we are looking for growth potential in all of the proposers for linking partner services and integrated service provision. So we're looking to make sure that they can expand with us, and we are looking as much as possible for organizations that can serve all 3 counties, all 4 school districts, in the current sites that are open and willing to move with us into new. So they are going to fill out these confounds to tell us that.
Are most of these programs at one specific site, or are a lot of them multi-site?
Our goal would be to offer all of the linking partner services at every site, because currently some of our funded partners can't go everywhere. Not every site has every service.
Right.
Principals, however, have a menu offered to them of the services that are available in their site, and then they select. So we have also sometimes had a principal not select every available service for their school.
But as far as the ISPs, the linking partners, aren't they usually single site?
No, currently one ISP agency has 7 of our 11 schools. One has 3.
Community and schools?
Communities and Schools has 7, right? South Carolina Maritime has 3. And then there is one school now that's currently reviewing for a new partnership because they had formerly been Boys and Girls Club too.
So from a scoring perspective, if they have a logical reason, there should be no penalty for that.
That is right. Right. So if they can't go somewhere, that's not held against them. Okay. All right. So now we're looking at the Integrated Service Provider Program Description Narrative. So they will have reviewed the funding directives. Again, you will be familiar with them. You can access that right from this slide on the ODM. And in rating this section, we're asking you to take into account the degree to which the program has described specific content, including interventions, curricula, frequency of intervention, length of service, how volunteers and partners will be used, etc., and addresses the funding directives and provides a coherent program design based upon research, evidence, or standards. So they have instructed about this, as you can see in their instructions, and you should be making sure that they are speaking to each of those specific interventions, curricula, frequency, or length of service, and then they're describing how they'll address the funding directives specific to links to success. So the top of the roadmap, when we get there again, has those funding directives, and this is where you will see this.
This obviously is the most important part. This is where you're going to get the meat. This is where you're going to be able to understand what the program really does. So it also has the greatest number of characters, or essentially it'll be around 3 pages as a limit, which should give them enough time or enough space to really be able to explain everything to you. It also correspondingly has the highest number of points. It's a quarter of the total 100 points in terms of how well they've described their service.
Something that's important for you to understand about this is that each integrated service provider currently, and we expect this to be true about new proposers, has something in their model that distinguishes them in terms of having experience and expertise in educational settings, but they can be very different. For example, if we use our 2 current ISPs, Communities and Schools has a case management model. So they meet with students individually, they do parent outreach surrounding school events, they focus on behavioral intervention. And South Carolina Maritime Foundation has an academic enrichment model, and they are math and science infused. So there's a big focus on lunch buddies and tutors and mentors and running math groups and reading enrichment groups. Communities and Schools hires social workers at the master's level, and South Carolina Maritime Foundation hires teachers at the master's level. When we talked earlier about having the lunch and learns for site coordinators and trying to have each the expertise of each agency inform the others, that's what we're talking about. So we see relative merit in each of those models and would be concerned that case management models have a methodology for addressing academic need, and academic models have a methodology for addressing behavioral needs. So it would not be our expectation that these narratives for ISP agencies would look the same, but that when you look at them, you see what their logic is for addressing as many of the strategies as possible and for coordinating the services of people who do something different than they do in the school. Okay. If we could go back for just a minute. This form is slightly different for the linking partner application on the LOI. We ask them also to tell us how they will work with the ISP agency to share the data and to coordinate the services. So the ISP agency is responsible for negotiating the referrals from school administration and faculty and prioritizing referral among the linking partners, but each linking partner agency has to be able to show a model for eligibility for their service, for prioritization of their service, for how their service will communicate with the ISP agency at mid-year reporting and year-end reporting, but also when there's a vacancy for a child or when a child's not doing well in that service and might need an alternate referral. So it's all about communication in the linking partner LOI. In the ISP LOI, it's all about coordination. So it's slightly different in this service narrative. Any questions about that? Okay, next slide. Here's the world famous roadmap. So when we're talking about compliance with the links specific funding directives, we're talking about this first section, funding directives. Okay, some of these things are new to this funding cycle, so it will be very important for both ISP agencies and linking partner agencies to describe to us how they're going to do this. The first is an example of that. We're asking that whether you're a linking partner or the integrated service provider, you track individual children through all years of service to show gains over time. So if we have a child who has mental health services for 3 years, we may expect to see enhancement in coping, enhancement in functioning, enhancing in academics because of coping, right? If we had a child who had backpack buddies for 3 years, we might wonder, did that family get a financial stability program referral? And is there a way to address the food insecurity other than continuing in backpack buddies? There may be families that will need that level of support at a basic needs service because they're not eligible for other things. But by and large, you wouldn't expect the same children to need backpack buddies for multiple years, because you would expect there would be additional interventions that would address the root cause. So we're looking for that kind of tracking so that we know to ask those questions. Okay. Then we're using standardized pre- and post-test measures to quantify academic and or psychosocial gains. So in the outcome statements and performance measures, as you go through, it will tell you what they have to use. Again, our currently funded partners helped us develop this. In several of the strategy areas, it will say that it's a baseline year, and so the measure the threshold has not been set, or the measure is to be determined. So in that case, if they're choosing that strategy, they're going to tell you what they're thinking about using and what the research behind that is. In all other cases, if they're choosing our strategy, they're agreeing to that performance measure. So you just want to make sure that that's clear in their narrative. And again, in addition to choosing for ISPs 2 or more of these, and for linking partners 1 of these or more, they're going to tell us strategies and performance measures they're already using in their specialty service. And then you're asking yourself, is that research-based? Is it tied to a certain curricula? What's the level and duration of intervention? Does it make sense for the capacity they're suggesting? Those kinds of things. So the next thing is that if they're proposing to do an after-school program or a mentoring program, that they have agreed to adhere to the after-school program standards or the mentoring standards. These are also in your call for investment guide. All of our potential proposers have had these. since the funding process was opened, and so they should be very familiar with them. They are modeled on national standards. You want to demonstrate increases in parent and caregiver participation for each funding year. This will be particularly important for the ISP agencies. There are some strategies that they're responsible for coordinating that. But we also want to make sure that linking partner services are communicating with the child's family. And for those that are adult-centric, like the Financial Stability Project, GED services, all of that, that they're also asking about the child's functioning and how this service can help with the child's functioning as they go forward. Again, the focus is integration. So we're trying to make sure that in all cases, we're involving the family in the Community Learning Center. We want to provide experiences with 21st century technology as a component of service. So if you're an academic tutor, maybe you're using a computer lab part of the time. If you're doing service learning with kids, maybe they're tracking the data for that using technology. Whatever it is, we know that one of the places where graduates from this region lose viability for employment is a lack of experience with 21st century technology. We're hearing that from potential employers. So we want to make sure that our kids have that exposure. And that's being helped in some of our schools by grants the schools have gotten. Yesterday I learned that Hot Gap has now gone to be an iPad school, and every student is getting their iPad next week. So I'm hoping to visit Hot Gap because there will be many happy children. That the linking partner or ISP agency actively participates in Links to Success meetings, training opportunities, retreats, etc. Again, because our focus is integration, we want to make sure that everybody working in the school knows who else is working in the school and knows about the referral process and how to get concerns they're noting to the ISP so that that can be represented on the core team of the school and additional referrals can be made. When you have many players in one place, particularly with high-need kids, it's easy to lose information. And so in support of collaboration, we have to set up processes that keep us informed and helping to evolve the initiative, but also keep the members in the initiative informed of each other's growth and services. You want to make sure that they conduct together, ISPs and linking partner services together, conduct an annual school and community forum to identify and respond to needs, share and build upon successes, and engender positive communication between youth, their families, school personnel, and community members. This is probably one of the most critical things for the evolution of Links over the next 3 years. We have had some success in getting districts and schools to understand what each of the service providers do. There is a little less success with having parents be able to identify what's a link service, what are the linking partners, how their child is eligible for that, what to do if they have a concern about their child. So we've put a lot of work into increasing that, and the Financial Stability Project has been a huge help in terms of parent outreach for that. But the community itself, surrounding the school, the neighborhood, very few of our mentors and tutors come from those neighborhoods. They come from other places. And so we want to make sure that over time the community itself comes to own its learning center and comes to tell us what's specific about that community that creates a service gap or a practical problem that hasn't been overcome because we don't know about it. And that children see adults in their neighborhood, aside from their parents, who care about their education and are willing to nurture that in some way. And so we want to hear from the ISP agencies how they'll coordinate that, but we also want to hear from the linking partners how they'll participate in that. For ISP agencies, we're asking that they show us how they'll coordinate services sufficient to empower use of the effective education key strategies that are 1 to 3 in the roadmap, the strategies for integration, which are 4 to 8, and linking partner agencies must demonstrate use of 1 or more key strategies and coordination of that service with the ISP. So we've said that before. ISPs are telling us how they'll get everything covered to the extent that that's possible. And linking partners are telling us how they'll do their specialty thing, but how they'll communicate that and coordinate that with the ISP. And we're looking to promote extended learning opportunities via administration of or linkage with an after-school program and administration of or linkage with summer programs for LINKS participants. This priority is expected to be developed over the next 3-year funding cycle in partnership with TUW and other community partners. Again, we know how cost intensive that is. So it is unlikely that at this point we'd be able to fund an after-school program in every school. We may be able to be a piece of an after-school program in some schools, and we may want to have in our minds the models that look very promising for us that as revenue is developed, we would like to invest in over the next 3 years. So the next is the logic model. In reviewing, you want to make sure that there's a clear logical flow between the inputs, what people invest, the outputs and outcomes. We're going to look at a logic model form in a minute that'll make that clearer. And you're going to ask yourself, does the logic model clearly demonstrate how those things together are likely to advance the desired outcome? You're going to ask if there's cohesion between the logic model and the narrative. Again, the logic model should pretty much outline what the narrative fills in. Does the logic model frame the narrative? If you can answer yes to these questions, then the applicant should receive the full score for points. If there are any insufficiently supported elements of the narrative that are not supported by the logic model or vice versa, then taking points off is appropriate. You can click right into the logic model form from there.
Not from here.
Yes.
It's just a snapshot.
Should we skip?
It's on the next
Right.
slide.
So we have given you an example logic form to look at. So there would be a program name, and they would tell you essentially what they're doing. And then their overarching goal should be measurable and should tell you in a glance what they hope to accomplish. So this particular program is going to do academic enrichment and asset development for 75 second to 5th graders over a summer program that's going to last 8 weeks. Okay. And then what they invest in that includes their staff, and if you scroll to the next screen, volunteers, coordination of weekly exposure activities, and use of a standardized curricula. So that's what they've put their resources into. The next is outputs, and it's what you do. So that's how they'll prepare their staff, and if you scroll down, they'll prepare their volunteers, how many children will be served in the exposure activities, how many children will use the standardized curricula in what way, with pre and post testing over 12 learning modules in 8 weeks, etc. Then you go to outcomes, and short-term outcomes tell you the knowledge or awareness or attitude development that you're looking to see. Medium outcomes tell you the behavior change you're looking to see. And longer-term outcomes tell you a change in social condition. It is unlikely that programs are able to demonstrate a longer-term outcome in a 3-year cycle. However, because some of our partners have been funded in previous cycles, they may be moving towards longer-term outcomes at this point. And some of the proposing partners may have started this work in other ways and have longer-term outcomes in mind. So we want them to be able to show us that. But it would not be uncommon for there to be fewer entries in that field than in the other two. So if you scroll to the next page, if you look at using a standardized curriculum with 75 kids who are going to pre and post test and use 12 learning modules, then here you're looking for a threshold. So they're expecting 85% of those kids completing the program will demonstrate gains across at least 3 skill domains. So math, things like computation and operations, reading, things like comprehension and decoding, between pre and post testing. And then for behavior change, they're going to follow these kids, and they're saying that 85% of the kids completing the program will demonstrate no regression between spring and fall MAPS programming. That's a goal of a summer programming, to make sure that kids don't go backwards over the summer and have to retrace progress in the fall. And that 50% of the students completing the program will demonstrate gains of at least 5 points on 3 or more RIT bands between spring and fall. So not only did they maintain, but they actually improved some. That's their goal. Each one of these will look different based on what the purpose of the program is, but it gives you a sense that what you're looking for is logic between what they invest in, how they use that investment, what they expect to come out of that, first in terms of skills and then in terms of behavior. Okay. Any questions about the logic model?
This being the LOI, we will likely not have logic models with this amount of detail. And so if you get one that's simpler than this, that doesn't necessarily mean that they didn't do a good job. What you're really looking for, again, is that marrying of what they're saying here back to the narrative, and that between the two of them, you're having a good sense of what the program does and how they're going to measure their success.
And each of our prospective partners, funded partners first, and then people who've told us they're applying, have completed outcome measurement training using this particular logic model form. So they're familiar with it, and they have been trained in a way that should minimally tell us how much of something, how often, with what input will produce an outcome for what percentage of the population. So we are, it may not have as many words, but we are definitely looking for that level of competency with the logic model, and that the narrative supports that. Okay, now we're on to annual participants and budget. For the annual participants, we're looking for the narrative to justify the total program site cost, and the total program site cost is reasonable in relation to the anticipated number of participants per site. Again, this is the ISP form. The linking partner form is slightly different, and in that form it's about capacity for the proposed service. So here they may be saying, and at this point ISPs won't know what their linking partners are, so they won't be able to say it for the whole constellation of services in a site. They'll be able to say it for the services they're proposing as part of their model. So they may be saying that the whole program site for what they're offering is this, okay? And then later in the application, because they'll have the linking partner pieces, that number will change and will inflate because of all the linking partner services. So after they tell us that, you're looking for what they're requesting for site coordination, and that it's reasonable in relation to the total cost for site coordination. Different than most of the TUW funding processes, where we ask people to provide at least 50% of the cost of a program. For site coordination alone, it is our expectation that we fund the site coordinator position. So while there is no legacy funding, there is a standard rate for that position right now, which is $43,250. And that includes the salary, the benefits, some level of supervision. There are agencies that will tell you that that costs more for them, and we wouldn't expect to see that as the number for this. And again, there's no legacy funding. But this is the place that's different than most of the other applications, because the idea here is that we're funding a site coordinator to coordinate all the other services in the site. Donna, do you want to speak to that more?
Somewhat different. By the time that you all got involved last time, we had already negotiated the prices. So you weren't seeing raw numbers in terms of how much it would cost per site. This being a new funding cycle, as we've mentioned several times, non-legacy funding, We needed to get a benchmark in terms of how much is really costing our average ISP agency to provide the site coordination piece. What will happen is, from the time of which you decide if you think that they merit going forward, we will negotiate that price so that when we get into the funding cycle and reviewing applications in the spring, you'll actually, everything will add up and we'll know what the total dollar amount is. Similar to last year. Does that make sense? Are you remembering, Jenny, I'm looking at you. Making sense? Yeah, okay.
It's also important to remember then that when people are proposing, they're proposing based on their best estimate of what it will cost to do this service for 3 years. So it's important that they, in a fiscally responsible way, are computing what their other than personnel services costs will be in 2015.
Just to clarify, this is for an annual cost. This isn't.
But it
total
doesn't
cost.
increase for 3 years,
No,
right?
it doesn't. So this is their annual cost per site.
Right.
So you're saying that if, for our purposes, this page is not real relevant?
No, it is. Because part of what you're going to be deciding is when you're looking at their total cost of their site cost, does that make sense given the number of participants they say they're going to be serving? This is for the ISP. Actually, there's a similar question for whenever you get to the LP form too.
Yeah, but they're gonna be giving us total cost as well as the TV.
Right. And then whenever we're looking at the site coordination costs, does that make sense in terms of what they're asking for from TUW?
Okay. I got it.
Okay. And you're also then looking for diversified funding sources, as Irene's mentioned.
Okay, and again, in the linking partner form, this would be slightly different because it would be based on capacity. And in many but not all cases, they would be showing us that they have 50% of funding from other sources. When they don't show that, that would be part of the recommendation meeting to talk about why that might be, if it's still valid to move forward with that, etc. Okay. So criteria for breakthrough opportunities does not actually apply in this training because links itself is a breakthrough opportunity. In other impact areas, we are looking for what collectively would make the most sense for moving the needle. We have said, due to your work in past funding cycles, and thank you for that the integration in links is in itself a breakthrough opportunity. But because of that, we wanted you to see what's being used in the other impact areas and make sure that when you're thinking about the LOIs that you've reviewed from both linking partners and ISP agencies, that together they're still doing this. You know, that they're likely to have a sustainable impact on the community indicators and the 10-year goal, that each of the components is evidence-based, and that together it fully incorporates one of the models of community change, that being education. So the education model, when you look at it in the agenda for community impact, starts with the individual child, goes out to the family, goes out to the school, goes out to the community. So in the constellation of services through links, there should be supports for the individual child, supports for the family, integration with the school, and community investment in the model. Okay? And it's always a collaborative model for links, but you're going to make sure that you're satisfied with how the collaboration has been described and that each of the partners has demonstrated experience and capacity that will move the whole forward, not just their piece of it.